Greetings, I am Szántai Gábor. This is the second episode of Hungarian History Podcast, and among other things, my aim is to explore Hungary's forgotten clashes with the Ottomans, a conflict that shaped the fate of Europe. Today we ask, who were the Turks? How did they become Ottomans? And why did their elites despise the very word Turk? So today we meet the Turks, the conquerors, whose aim was to collect the much desired golden apples of Europe, which were Buda, Vienna, Prague, Venice, Rome, Paris, Berlin, and to place these lands under the steely rule of the Sultan. It was how they wanted to bring the peace of Islam to the world, to the whole world. We must also explain the difference between the Turks and the Ottomans. To understand the coming clash of civilizations, we need to see Hungary at its medieval height. In the 14th century, the kingdom was Christendom's equal. It was matching France in size and military power. The Kingdom of Hungary was a medium-sized state in Europe, serving its proper function in the development of the Western way of life. Economically, Hungary was not a backwater, but Europe's treasure trove. The country was supplying most of the gold, silver, and copper, as well as the salt, for the whole continent, along with gold, which supplied 80% of Europe's needs, and silver, which provided 25%. Salt mining made the Hungarian kings richer than any European monarchs. In the Middle Ages, salt wasn't just for cooking. It was essential for preserving food. It was so valuable that many soldiers, servants, and even church officials were paid in salt. Salt was as important as oil today. Did you know that before the Battle of Mohács in 1526, the Hungarian kingdom produced 75% of the salt used in Europe? Copper has been a major export since the 13th century, and while annual production in the 14th century was around 10,000 quintals, by the early 16th century it had tripled. Hungary's prosperity reached even its peasants. Where else in Europe did ordinary people regularly eat meat? In the 14th and 15th centuries, with the development of guild manufacturing in Western Europe, the role of cities increased, and people moved to cities in large numbers. The meat needs of the growing urban population were met by exporting cattle reared in Eastern Europe. Since the Middle Ages, tens of thousands of Hungarian grey cattle have been driven from Hungarian pastures to Western European markets. The heyday of this trade was in the 17th century, when the number of cattle exported annually from Hungary was estimated at 100,000. However, by this time, both the cattle and the copper business have gone mostly in the hands of the Fugger bank house. Nature itself fortified the kingdom, with the Carpathian Mountains and huge rivers forming a natural fortress. The kings wielded a firm, centralized power, which was stronger than the rule of the other European monarchs. The defense system was so efficient that no invader had breached them since the Mongolian invasion of 1241 and 42. Even the Black Death of 1349 spared Hungary the devastation seen elsewhere in Europe. Hungary's military became a power factor in both East and West through a unique combination of fighting styles. While Western kingdoms relied on heavy knights, the Eastern empires had swift horsemen. But Hungary mastered both. It was fielding armored cavalry that could charge like Frank knights alongside lightning-fast horse archers who preserved the ancient nomadic traditions. This hybrid warfare made them deadly to all enemies. Now let's take a look at the Ottomans. In the meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire gradually became stronger, bigger, richer, and more centralized than any other European states. The sultans used a different kind of feudalism that allowed them to become masters of life and death over their subjects. Their empire was based on constant military expansion, and the Ottoman army offered excellent military careers to talented soldiers who could rise from slave to senior officer. This promotion system helped the Ottomans build a professional standing army that was unparalleled in the contemporary world. The famous Janissary units were a match for any Western pike and shot mercenary bands. Regarding firearms, thanks to Venice and France, the Turks always had the latest artillery in abundance. The army's logistics system was so smooth and well structured that was better than any Western states. Note that it would be 100 years before Western armies were able to develop a similarly sophisticated logistical supply system. Two worlds, two civilizations, two religions, two forms of feudalisms clashed on the battlefields of Hungary. One, and only one, could prevail in this struggle for supremacy. Let us not forget that it was the Kingdom of Hungary that was the greatest obstacle to the Ottomans from the time they began their rule in the 14th century until their decline in the 18th century. In the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire was already a mighty superpower, conquering vast territories from Egypt to Syria. But who were the Turks, and how did they become Ottomans? We must first understand the complex origins of the Turks. Only a few people realize that Turkish identity as we know it only emerged in the early 20th century. Before that, the term Turk had a very different connotations, sometimes derogatory, within the Ottoman Empire itself. During the 15th and 17th centuries, Hungarians and other Europeans routinely referred to them as Turks, a term that would have offended any self-respecting Ottoman elite. In fact, since the Seljuk era, the name Turk had become something of a put-down within the empire. It was often used to despise others, calling them ignorant Turk, kind of Türk-i bidrak in Turkish, and it referred to uneducated peasants. These so-called Turks were then seen as backward provincials, unworthy of participating in imperial governance. The elite, instead, proudly called themselves Ottomans, distancing themselves from their Turkish roots. Yet, ironically, their empire grew directly out of the Seljuk civilization, the true cultural and ethnic ancestors of the Ottoman state. Let us see how this took shape. The roots of the Turkish peoples can be traced back to the 6th century AD, when nomadic tribes first appeared as the common ancestors of both modern Turks and all Turkic peoples. Originally, these groups, including the Uyghurs, Karluks, and other tribes belonging to the Turkic dynastic tradition, were collectively known as Turkmen. This was the cradle of civilization that would eventually produce both the Seljuks and the Ottomans. The real turning point came in 1071, when Seljuk Turkish tribes broke out of the Caucasus Mountains and crushed Byzantine forces at the Battle of Mazinkert. This stunning victory allowed the Seljuk Turks to permanently alter the power structure in Asia Minor. It was the beginning of the long eclipse of Byzantine influence in Anatolia and Syria, a process that the Ottomans would later complete. The Seljuk conquest brought about a profound cultural change. Muslim rulers now ruled over Christian populations in the whole of Anatolia, and through gradual conversion and assimilation, the region became predominantly Muslim, with Turkish becoming the dominant language by the mid-13th century. But just as this transformation was nearing its end, the Mongolian peril arrived. In 1241 and 42, Hungary faced its own devastation, but for the Seljuks, the big blow came in 1243. At the Battle of Kösedag, the Mongols and their so-called Yellow Storm crushed the Sultanate of Rum, leaving the once mighty Seljuk state in pieces. The Mongolians were gone, and from the ruins of the former Seljuk Sultanate an even more formidable force emerged: the Ottomans. They were harder, fiercer, and more warlike than any rival tribes. The story started with a single warrior chieftain and 400 loyal followers. He was Ertugrul Bey, who carved out a domain for his warrior tribe in Anatolia on the Byzantine frontier in 1250. His son Osman, who lived between 1281 and 1326, expanded this territory into the ruling house of Osmanli, the dynasty we know now as the Ottomans. Were they very different from the Seljuk Turks? No, at least not at the beginning. Most importantly, the Ottomans kept their Oghuz Turk identity. They were also the proud descendants of the legendary Khan Oghuz, whose ancient laws and traditions they preserved even as they forged a new imperial destiny. These early Ottomans shared more than just language with their Turkic ancestors. Their Islamic faith still carried echoes of ancient shamanistic traditions. It was a spiritual bridge to their nomadic past. Like all Turkic peoples since the great steppe empires, they claimed the proud name Turk. But how comes that their later rulers disdained it? Let's see how Ottomans replaced Turks in the 14th century. After entering Europe in 1532 and crossing the Balkans, their society began to change. By the 15th century, they had two main classes. Firstly, the askari. They were the soldiers and officials, the privileged class. Secondly, the raja, who were the tax-paying ordinary working people. But all of them still shared four key things that made them Ottomans. First, their Muslim faith. Second, the belief that they were descended from Oghuz Khan. Third, the same Turkish language. Fourth, the ancient nomadic traditions. These four unifying elements persisted well into the 16th century. But as the Ottoman state expanded, the structure of its elite and its identity changed dramatically. Gradually, Ottoman subjects began to see themselves differently, no longer simply as Turks, but as loyal followers of the Ottoman dynasty. Their homeland wasn't just Turkey, it was Osman Ali, the realm of Osman himself. The ruling elite, step by step, monopolized the term Ottoman and abandoned their Turkish identity. During the 15th century, the Ottoman askari class became even more divided. A new elite emerged, what historians call the palace order. In fact, many of these top officials were descended from slaves rather than the old Turkish aristocracy whose influence the sultans deliberately weakened. So this new elite forged a distinct identity, governed by what they called the Ottoman way. It was the Ebed-i Osmani. They even developed their own language, Osmanli, a sophisticated blend, increasingly loaded with Arabic and Persian loanwords. Remarkably, this courtly language became so specialized that even most askari soldiers could barely understand it, let alone ordinary peasants. By the late 15th century, this new Ottoman language had fully crystallized, and knowledge of it became the key to advancement. If you couldn't read and write Osmanli, well, you would never join the ruling class. The sultans deliberately replaced tribal leaders with slave officials to consolidate central power. Then came a remarkable twist in the 16th century. Suddenly, only the sultan's brother-in-laws could become grand viziers. Here is why it mattered. Because Ottoman princes were typically born to slave mothers, this policy gradually merged the royal family with the slave official elite, creating an entirely new power structure separate from the old Turkish aristocracy. These high-ranking Ottoman officials were people of slave origin, who were new converts to Islam, although they often had links with Christian relatives in neighboring countries such as Serbia. The imperial elite became remarkably cosmopolitan and ethnically diverse. At the same time, they actively worked to eradicate all traces of original Turkish identity. What? Let's read this again and apply it for our modern time in Europe. The imperial elite became remarkably cosmopolitan and ethnically diverse. At the same time, they actively worked to eradicate all traces of original Turkish identity. Now we understand how the term Turk acquired its derogatory meaning in Ottoman society in the early 16th century. The state actively discouraged Turkish identity and instead promoted an exclusively Islamic imperial character. By this time, the old Turkic language had been completely replaced by Ottoman among the elite, creating a clear linguistic divide between rulers and commoners. The name Turk was all the more inappropriate in the 16th century, especially when we consider the Ottoman occupying forces in Hungary, because these soldiers communicated mainly in a Bosnian Slavic dialect rather than Turkish. I repeat, it was on the Ottoman-occupied land of Hungary. According to contemporary payrolls, 98% of them were either Albanians or South Slavics. All the songs, ballads, and legends of these Ottoman paid warriors in Hungarian garrisons were preserved in the Serbian language. This is why some contemporary sources speak of a Serbian menace instead of a Turkish menace, which makes the period of the Ottoman Wars even more exciting. Many Hungarian people today are not aware that the Turks in Hungary were not Turks in the 16th century but Serbians and Albanians. The Turks in the Ottoman Empire were not just Turks but also Osmanli. In our next episode, how were the Ottomans seen? Get to know the perspectives of Hungarians, Serbians, Croatians, Albanians, Greeks, Bosnians, and Venetians. Join me by subscribing wherever you like, on Spotify for basic access, on Patreon or Substack for full subscriber benefits, or even on Buy Me a Cafe for direct support. A quick note, while you can listen to most of the episodes on Spotify, the full series with bonus content will be on Substack, the only platform that allows me to properly build a community. By supporting on Substack, you are helping to keep this truly independent story alive. Without subscriber backup, these stories are in danger of being forgotten. Please help me bring them to life. Remember, history doesn't belong to those who lived it, but to those who preserve it. This is Santai Gábor and the Hungarian History Podcast, the only English voice telling our nation's story. See you next time. Sziasztok, viszonthallásra!